Hello again. So this section is all about transpiration experiments. We have the bubble potometer, the weight potometer, or mass potometer as it's sometimes known, and finally the washing line experiment. Now remember we said transpiration is the evaporation of water from the mesophyll cells followed by diffusion through the air spaces and the stomata. So each of these three experiments can measure something about transpiration in one way or another. So let's have a look at it. So the first one's the bubble potometer. Now the bubble potometer will measure water uptake. It can't give an actual value for transpiration because some of the water which is taken up actually gets used in photosynthesis and some of it is used to support the plant. So this will give us an idea of water uptake, not necessarily transpiration. So here's how it works. You basically have a really thin tube which is filled with water, and when you're setting it up, you set it up so that it has a little air bubble in it. Then you put a little chute in the end, and what will happen is the chute will take up the water, it will evaporate from the leaves, and as that's happening, it will pull the water from this little tube upwards and it will pull the bubble along. Now, the point of this is that if you measure how far the bubble moves in a certain time, it tells you how much water the plant or the shoot is taking up. You can then use the little syringe for resetting the bubble position. Now this works based on the fact of what we've talked about. So a normal plant in the ground absorbs water through its roots, and then the water travels up through the plant and it evaporates through the leaves in transpiration. Same thing happens here. Water gets taken up from this little tube and evaporates up and out through the leaves. It replaces the water it loses from this tube. So we simply measure how far the bubble moves in a certain period of time, and that tells us what rate the chute is taking up water. So as I say, the bubble will move depending on water uptake. If the bubble moves a large distance in a time given, water uptake is happening at a high rate. But if the bubble only moves a short distance, it means that water uptake is happening at a slower rate. And as I say, as the leaf loses water, the air bubble moves. The distance moved over a time period is measured. Boop! Away it goes. So we would measure how far it's moved in a certain period of time, and that will give us an idea of the rate. Now, how is the bubble potometer set up? Firstly, you fill the potometer with water, and it's set up underwater. You cut the end of a leafy twig underwater. You attach the twig to the potometer, ensuring a tight fit, and you seal it with Vaseline. And then you introduce an air bubble into the potometer. Then, the distance moved by the bubble shows the rate of water uptake by the chute and gives an indication of the rate of transpiration. And a few questions you can get about this. How is the potometer set up? You set it up underwater, and that prevents any unwanted air bubbles forming in the tube. Now, that's an important detail because we do want one bubble, but we don't want loads and loads of bubbles. So we set it up underwater, and you take all the apparatus, submerge it in water, and it means that that gets rid of all the air, apart from the bubble that you want. What's the function of the syringe, or sometimes it's called a reservoir? It allows you to reset the apparatus so that the experiment can be repeated and run under different conditions. So you might want to repeat it and get an average to make it more reliable, or you might want to run it under different conditions to see how different things affect the rate of transpiration. So for example, you could change the temperature, you could change the wind speed, or you could even change the humidity. Then air leaks will stop the apparatus working. How and where is the apparatus sealed? So it's sealed with Vaseline at the joints. What environmental factors will affect transpiration? Wind speed will increase the rate of transpiration because there's more evaporation. Temperature will increase transpiration because there's more evaporation. And humidity will decrease transpiration because there's less evaporation. Now, we're going to explain those in a bit more detail, but before we go on, it's important to recognise here that leaf surface is not an environmental factor, and that's because the leaf will have a different surface area based on the size of the leaf, not the environment it's in. So let's go back and explain these in a bit more detail. Now, think of transpiration, and if it's happening fast or slow, as if you were trying to dry your clothes. If you wanted to dry your clothes quickly, you would want it to be windy, warm, and not humid. And that's how you can dry your clothes quickest. So these three factors are also going to affect how fast transpiration takes place. So if we look at temperature first, high temperatures equals a fast rate of transpiration. If this one was in high temperature and this one was in low temperature, high temperatures basically means that water can evaporate quicker. That's why if it rains on a hot day, the water will evaporate quickly, whereas if it rains on a cool day, it will evaporate less slowly or less quickly. So in high temperatures, there is more evaporation. So high temperatures equals faster evaporation. So more transpiration, or we can say a faster rate of transpiration will take place. Whereas low temperatures is the opposite. Slower evaporation, so a slower rate of transpiration. Because in low temperatures, water evaporates more slowly. To replicate this in experiment, you could use a heater. The next one is humidity. So humidity is basically how much water vapor is in the air. So in this one, if there is a lot of water vapor in the air, that means there is a high level of humidity. So that is going to mean that there is a slow rate of transpiration. And here's why. So imagine there's these water molecules in the leaf. And there's also a lot of water outside the leaf. So this is a level of high humidity. Now in this case, we have a high concentration of water inside the leaf and a high concentration of water outside the leaf. So the diffusion gradient is too shallow. So transpiration is slow. And that's because there's not enough evaporation. Whereas, let's say for example, on a very dry day, so if this is less humid conditions or low humidity, we have a high concentration of water inside the leaf, but a low concentration outside the leaf. So this time, there is a steep diffusion gradient. So therefore, there's more evaporation, and as a result, faster rate of transpiration. So wind then, if there's lots of wind, there's going to be more evaporation, and so faster rate of transpiration. Now here's why. Say for example we've got all these water molecules in our leaf, but there's very still conditions. What's going to happen is the water will evaporate, but it's going to build up outside the leaf. So that means, again, there is a shallow diffusion gradient. Which means that there's not much evaporation. So there's slow transpiration, or a slow rate of transpiration. But consider on a windy day, we have our high concentration of water in here, in the leaf. It evaporates out, but this time when it goes out, the wind comes along and carries it away. So that means that you always have a high concentration of water here and a low concentration here. So we can say that the wind maintains a steep diffusion gradient. So therefore, there is more evaporation, and as a result, faster transpiration. So here we are all together. The factors that affect transpiration the most are temperature, wind, and humidity. So if we want fast transpiration, it needs to be high temperatures, because that increases the rate of evaporation. We want lots of wind or high wind speeds, and we want low humidity. Transpiration is going to be slower if it is cold, there is no wind or it is still, and it's very humid.